everyone, Jen here. I'm the founder and executive director of the Muddy Pug Farm and Sanctuary outside of Maple Valley, Washington. But today I am recording in front of the residents of what will become our second sanctuary located outside of Volcanoes National Park on the Big Island of Hawaii. And we are here to talk through One Day I Want to Have a Farm Sanctuary, the fabulous book by the team at the Cloven Heart Farm Sanctuary. And we have gotten through the first chapter of the book, which was the reality versus the fantasy of what people think living on a sanctuary and working on a sanctuary might be like. And we are into the next chapter, which is aptly called Migraines and Mayhem. So like we are off the deep end of what it is really like living the day-to-day and doing this work. And I don't suffer migraines from doing the work of the sanctuary, but holy cow, there is a boatload of mayhem day in and day out associated with the work of the sanctuary. And the first section that we are going to go through is called Living Fundraiser to Fundraiser. And we're going to talk through this section in a couple of ways, and I'm probably going to bring forward a perspective that is unique to me because of what I do in my day job. So if you have watched any of our segments before, you know that my one true love for my day job is the insurance business. But what I get to do in the insurance business is I have the good fortune of serving as the leader of a consulting practice for employee benefits consulting. And what I do in that role is I serve the sales organization by helping them obtain new clients, and then I serve the servicing organization by helping them with the day-to-day work of consulting. So as I go through this section, I will weave in the some of the points that the team at Cloven Heart is making around how fundraising can be extraordinarily stressful and some things that you need to think about. And because I am a sales leader in my day job, raising and selling may not be twins, but they are very, very close cousins. And so I am going to bring forward, as I talk about fundraising, some of the things that we think about as we think about selling that are applicable to fundraising in the day-to-day. It's funny to get this video started because this is the fourth or fifth time I have attempted to record this video. I've tried recording it out in the heavy use area a couple of weeks ago. I made a pass at recording this video about 10 days ago in the barn. Then I tried up again at the outbuilding. Now we're recording it in Hawaii. I feel like Sam I am, like I will do this in the Hawaii house. I will do this in front of the barn. So it is a lesson, my friends, that it's very rare for us to get things right the first time on the fly. And as we say in my day job, practice makes perfect. So let's dive into it. So what we're going to talk about is fundraising in a couple of important aspects. And first and foremost, we're going to talk about like why do you need to think about fundraising as a practice that requires discipline and rigor and focus and strategy, and why you can't just wake up every day and wonder where you're going to get funding for your sanctuary. So once we talk about that, we'll transition to like, how do you get your arms around what kind of funding you need? Because that is going to inform the next segment of the vastly different strategies that you can employ when you are thinking about the business of fundraising. And last but certainly not least, we'll talk about some important considerations as you think about the different modes of fundraising, as well as how you can think about scaling. First, if you are thinking about doing fundraising and you're like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to think about this. The thought of asking complete strangers for money is extraordinarily stressful. My friends, I would say two things about that. First, as the Cloven Heart team points out, living from fundraiser to fundraiser is a lot like living paycheck to paycheck. And I have lived paycheck to paycheck in my adult life, and holy smokes, like there is no kind of stress like not really knowing if you're going to have enough money to sustain yourself. And when you think about your sanctuary, that is like 100 million X in terms of the level of stress, because you're not just thinking about yourself, but you are thinking about the entire sanctuary that you are there to support and shepherd and manage. And you have a responsibility to your residents to be very intentional, focused, disciplined, and strategic in terms of fundraising, so that you have the resources to provide them with the best life possible. So as we contemplate this question, like, gosh, why would I need to do this? Of course, like just like you would want for yourself to be able to supply the best life possible, you are not going to wake up every day and think, wow, I can't wait to spend my entire day solving the problem of where I get money. Like that would be so incredibly stressful. And as we've talked about before, the mental load of the sanctuary is extraordinary. You are going to be like physically tired, emotionally tired, mentally tired, without laying financial stress on top of all that. So that's sort of the first reason why you need to think about being more disciplined in approaching fundraising sort of as a stream of work that you do on the sanctuary. The second reason that you need to really get religion about how you fundraise is that there are many people that donate to animal welfare causes, and the challenge of that, and that is awesome that there are so many people that recognize that animals in our world struggle profoundly. That said, the number of people that wake up in the morning and say, I would like to support animal welfare causes by donating to a nonprofit farm sanctuary, are actually rather few and far between. The bulk of the fundraising that goes towards animal welfare is really geared towards companion animals. And that's because there is not necessarily an understanding of what farm animals go through in the day-to-day in our world. We live in a world where farmed animals are viewed as sort of the bottom of the barrel in terms of animal welfare. And we live in a world where the majority of people consume animals and view them as products, not as wonderful sentient beings that are worthy of a life of like peace and health and happiness. And so part of something you'll need to think about as you think about like, why do you have to be disciplined about fundraising? It is because you have to convince people to care about an issue that they don't normally care about. Even people that consider themselves to be animal lovers frequently consume farmed animals. And while they may academically understand that not awesome things happen to farmed animals in the animal agriculture system, that level of cognitive dissonance that occurs between someone who says they're an animal lover, sort of gets that factory farming and even like local farming and homesteading is not awesome for animals, and is a place of great suffering. And then they just sort of like mentally check out when they sit down to eat, and the choices that inform their eating habits are completely disconnected from what they may understand to be true. So when you think about fundraising as a sanctuary, it does require a level of discipline, focus, and strategy, because you are in the position where you have to sort of explain why this is important. You're going to have to be very disciplined about telling your story, not just the story of your sanctuary, but explaining why personally for you this is very important and why you are asking for support for this cause. And you're going to have to change kind of hearts and minds and how people perceive farmed animals, and before you directly ask for support. So that's why it's important to think about fundraising as a stream of work, just like you would think of animal care as a stream of work, or managing your facilities as a stream of work, or any other programs as a stream of work. Like, this is something that you are going to have to like embrace and do with intention every single day for the overall sustainability and welfare of your residents, for the sanctuary, and also for your own mental health. So if you need to pause to get over your get through your 5 stages of grief around fundraising and before you progress to the acceptance phase so that we could talk about actually what you do, feel free to do that. The other point that I want to make before I dive into this next section is I will quote someone on LinkedIn that I follow religiously from a sales standpoint, and his name is Chris Orlob. And what Chris talks about in his videos is that selling and sales is not something that you either can or can't do. Like, you may hear people will talk about, oh, like either you have it or you don't, either you can do this work or you can't. I don't necessarily believe that about selling. I do think you have to have sort of a certain amount of raw materials that you bring to the table. You have to be a resilient person. You have to be someone who can be strategic and disciplined. You have to be someone who can like think about a strategy and then think about the tactics that follow and sort of be disciplined enough to execute on those in the day-to-day. So yes, you do have to have some things inside of you, but selling and like the actual skills associated with selling are things that you can learn. And similarly, fundraising and selling are sort of kissing cousins. So while you can be taught to sell, you can be taught to fundraise. This is a skill that you can learn. Sales is a process that you can learn how to do and you can execute on. And similarly, fundraising has a rhythm to it and a series of steps that you absolutely are a capable, intelligent human being, and this is something that you can learn and you can do. And if I could give one more note of encouragement before we dive in, one of the wonderful things about thinking about fundraising on your sanctuary is that, unlike me, where I am blessed that I get to sell something as sexy and beautiful as the insurance in my day-to-day, we as sanctuary founders and executive directors or board members or development directors, like, we are selling something that we so deeply and fundamentally believe in and are passionate about, that is like, when you think about what motivates you, you are able to engage in something that you feel incredibly passionate about. This is something that you have carved out an incredible amount of your time and your talent and your resources, something that you devote an incredible amount of like physical, emotional, and mental effort towards. And so I would just sort of stand on that you have the good fortune of having the opportunity to evangelize and kind of open yourself up and be vulnerable and ask for the support of your community. And because this is a set of skills and a process that you can learn more about and master, just be very open to the idea of doing this work. And I'm gonna tell you a little side quest story, as one of our awesome volunteers, Sophia, talks about side quests. And many people ask me how I got into the insurance business and how I came to be in sales. And I am someone who is off the frickin' charts introverted, and I know that I don't come across that way, but I like took the Myers-Briggs years ago and continued to take it through many of my work lives where it required that test, and I am so far to the scale of introversion. Like, I got into the insurance business, not surprisingly enough, working behind the scenes, so I did not have a lot of client contact. I worked in a really analytical role, and some things happened in the brokerage firm that I was working for many years ago where the salesperson in a specific brokerage team left, the account manager in the specific brokerage team left, and so I thought, gosh, like, I want to take the next step in my career. So I went to the VP of sales at the time and I expressed my interest about moving into this next role, which I thought would be an account manager. And this woman 100% changed my life. And she looked at me and she said, Jennifer, you would make the worst fucking account manager. So I say that. And she said, you know, I'm going to give you this like personality test, and it's going to show you that you have all the raw materials to be a great salesperson, and you just need to like believe in yourself that you can do this. And I took the personality test, and it showed me that not only was I like off the charts introverted, but I was also an inveterate risk taker, that I think it said that I was so aggressive that if I don't modify my approach, it might be off-putting to some. Yes, indeed. I'd love to say I progressed in my life on that aspect, but I haven't. But it's just a lesson that you can kind of view yourself in a certain way, and you might like actually talk yourself out of doing some things because of how you perceive yourself. And looking from the outside, what I so appreciate about what that VP of sales said to me was like, she saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And I'm just connecting with all of you to say, you have the raw materials, you have the resilience, you have the ability to strategize, you clearly have the ability to execute if you are standing up a sanctuary, and all of those skills are eminently translatable to fundraising. So like, put on your big girl pants, as Todd Hesse would say. It's an inside joke for Kiva Pierce. Put on your big girl pants, or your big boy pants, as the case may be, because let's dive into like how you go about the business of this. So putting my sales leader hat on, the first thing that you really need to determine is to understand like, what is that magic number of annualized revenue that I need for my budget in order to keep my sanctuary going. And this number is critically important because there is a huge difference, my friend, not surprisingly, in the strategies and tactics that you will need to deploy if you are thinking of need to support a $5,000 budget versus a $50,000 budget versus a $500,000 budget. So the number that you arrive at is going to inform the types of strategies, where you look for funding, and how you are going to need to like chunk out that goal and sort of execute on that month over month. So where do you find out how much money you need if you're just getting going? Well, there's a couple of considerations and a couple of places that you should look. The first thing you should do is hit pause and go back and watch our video called If I Were a Rich Woman, LOL, because we talk in detail about the different considerations that you need to think about around your sanctuary financing. The TLDR of that is, first and foremost, go to the Open Sanctuary Project as you think about the types of residents that you want to take in, and I would like really think species specific. They have awesome lifetime care cost calculators. Say that 4 times really fast. And those cost calculators will help you to understand, all things being equal, what is the annual cost to raise a cow, a sheep, a goat, a duck, a bunny, And that will give you a good idea as you think about your space. In addition to thinking about just the all things being equal lifetime care, depending on your species, you and your board should also have conversations around the, admittance framework or the onboarding framework for specific types of residents. And this is where you and your board will sort of plant a flag on where your focus is going to be and the types of residents and the types of situations that they're coming from in your sanctuary. And so you may, for example, like us, decide to focus on individual rescues of animals that may come in from private surrender or individual outreach for neglect, abuse, and abandonment cases. And that is going to inform our budget in a specific way. You may have a strategic decision to rescue residents from the front lines of slaughter at slaughter auctions, which is going to inform your budget not only because you are likely going to have to purchase the freedom of those residents, but slaughter auctions are horrific places where residents and animals get dumped and they are in horrific shape. And so that is going to require a lot more intensive vet care, and that is going to inform your budget. You may decide not to focus on individual rescues. You may want to focus on sort of bigger rescue initiatives where there is like a large group of animals that might come out of a hoarding situation or a large abuse situation. And that is going to inform like not only just health and vet care, but also like how do you raise funds to house and transport and adopt out all of those residents. So that is a second really important consideration for you as you are thinking about your overall annual budget. There are other less sexy, non-resident facing considerations when you think about your annual budget. And so we talk about if I were a rich woman, LOL, what your considerations for your infrastructure are depending on the type of property that you have. And again, I would make sure that you get very clear with yourself and your board and to be very transparent with your donor community about the ownership situation with your sanctuary, and that you make some strategic and ethical above board decisions about how you are going to fund infrastructure projects within your sanctuary. So if you personally, like we do, own the property that the sanctuary sits on, I have made a philosophical decision with the board that we do not fundraise for any permanent structures on the sanctuary. And that is because I own the property and I believe that that is a personal benefit to me, like any long-term improvements to the property are a personal benefit to me. And I will be damned if I'm going to use any donor dollars to that end. I also, and I know that not all sanctuaries share that philosophy, but that is a decision that like you should just get clear on sooner rather than later. If the sanctuary owns the property that it sits on, then you can think about how you are going to use donor dollars for larger infrastructure projects, even things like fencing, security, shelter for the residents. So like think about that as you think about infrastructure. And if you are thinking about your long-term plan for the sanctuary and you need to space out some short-term and long-term infrastructure projects as you think about scaling your sanctuary, of course that should also be factored in the budget. Last but certainly not least is the consideration around the business expenses of the sanctuary. So a sanctuary is an organization just like any other organization, and you have all sorts of costs that are just part and parcel of running an organization. So you may have fees associated with your state and local jurisdictional filings. You may have to pass inspections in the area that you're in. You will have to pay for things like insurance. I love the insurance. Always want to talk about the insurance, but you should really think about not only the property and liability insurance of the sanctuary, but if the sanctuary is your only gig and you are not blessed to work two jobs like us, then you should think about like, how do you provide insurance for yourself and health insurance for yourself? I would also recommend that you think about those like odd business expenses, like you're going to have to pay for your website hosting. And if you use a donor platform, you're likely going to have to pay some sort of fee. And so those are all things that you should take into account in terms of your annual budget. So I fibbed a little bit. There's one more consideration that you are going to want to think about as you are developing your overall budget. And we talked about like annualized regular expenses that you should think of, but I just cannot recommend enough that you have a whole separate emergency fund that is quarantined from the regular finances of your sanctuary. And the reason that we recommend that is, expenses for the sanctuary can get so far afield so very fast when things go sideways on the sanctuary. And like, even for someone like me who is a compulsive planner and is like always thinking far, far ahead, man, the stuff that goes sideways on the sanctuary is just out of control. And for example, a few months ago, we decided to install a hay chute in our barn because our friends at Badger Hay were like, Hooker, we ain't delivering another bale of hay until you make it easier for us to get the hay throughout your barn. So you need to install a hay chute before we come back. So I was like, namaste, my friends. We will 100% install a hay chute. We have a wonderful contractor that we work with on most of our infrastructure projects. He's like, yeah, I can bang it out in an afternoon, no problem. This is going to be super fast. He calls me out to the barn like halfway through the job, and it turns out that the barn is infested with burrowing pests, and the entire lower level of the barn needed to be retrofitted to the tune of like $7,700, which I think was the all-in cost of that retrofit. And my friends, that was coinciding with our hay order. And if we did not have funds set aside for that, like, it would have completely wiped out our budget. On top of that, at the very same week, Princess got really, really sick and had to be rushed to the vet, and her vet bill was over $3,000. So, like, you can be as planful and intentional and systematic with your fundraising and your plans, but holy cow, Sanctuary Life has a way of humbling you and teaching you that best laid plans are not always going to pan out the way that you anticipate. And it's really important that you have some emergency funds stashed away so that you are not having to face these incredibly stressful situations, like, realizing that the barn was on the verge of collapse and it was a really dangerous place to be. And then having Princess be very sick, which was just emotionally gut-wrenching. I could not imagine laying a level of financial stress over that with like, I don't know how we're going to pay for this. So it is for your own mental health that you think about doing this and coming to a good number so that you have an overall idea of how much money it's going to take in the day-to-day, and based on your sort of species mix and the state of your property and the state of your infrastructure, what you might want to set aside for emergencies. So once you have that magic number, I would recommend that you and your board pause for a hot minute and you come into alignment, as we say in my day job, around the framework, another bingo word. You want to make sure that you are aligned as an organization about what you are willing to do and what you are not willing to do for money. And we'll talk about that as we get a little bit further into the strategies, but again, like, we talk about it a lot, that having sort of these guiding principles around who you are, what you're about as a sanctuary, what your values are, will help you to very quickly evaluate all sorts of stuff related to the running of the sanctuary, including fundraising, and having an idea of what is representative of your sanctuary and your values and who you are, and also in the furthering of your mission, and what falls outside of that scope, so that you are not having to grind through decisions and having to meet as a board and talk through that. So when we think about, the number that you have, and hopefully as a sanctuary, you are starting off very, very slow. I can absolutely appreciate that, like, if you have your property and your property is ready, you filed as a 501c3, and you have like all of the groundwork laid to start accepting residents, I absolutely appreciate the impulse to try to take on as many residents as possible. That is a place, like, I think that is one of the most dangerous places for a sanctuary to get far, far over their skis, is if you scale at a rate that is beyond your capacity when you are first starting out, especially before you lay the groundwork for effective fundraising. On the Muddy Pug, we kept our residents at roughly 8 to 10 residents for nearly a year before we really started scaling the sanctuary. So I would just strongly advise that you kind of slow your roll, and that you make sure that your fundraising efforts can keep pace with your resident onboarding efforts. So assuming that you are taking that advice, a really easy and low friction way to step into fundraising is through my arch nemesis, the social media. And while I struggle mightily with social media, partly because I'm a very private person, partly because mama's old, I'm pushing 50, and I don't always understand the ways of the social media. And just like fundraising, it is something that you can't just like wake up every morning and think, oh, what content am I going to push out? Like, it requires a level of discipline and execution as well. But if you can get your arms around engaging in social media and starting to consistently introduce your sanctuary, your story, the work that you do, who your residents are, and start asking for incremental support, that is a very like low friction way to step into fundraising and just kind of test it out. A very common strategy that sanctuaries deploy is $5 Fridays, which is like you push out content on Fridays, you ask people to donate a minimum of $5. They can even donate that through meta platforms like Instagram or Facebook, and it's a really easy way to start up fundraisers before you progress to more advanced fundraising, where you might do on meta platforms, you might do individual fundraising, you might do fundraising for a specific stream of work or a program or a large purchase that you're making. And as you kind of graduate up through social media, you can eventually graduate to platforms like Patreon, which is a platform that is gaining a ton of popularity, and it allows you to provide more exclusive and behind the scenes content. And it has the extra bonus, as we say in the insurance business, of creating annuitized evergreen income. So that is a great way and a great platform to think about graduating to as you get a sense of your consistent monthly expenses. And it's a way that sanctuaries will often budget for their supply purchases, is by fundraising through Patreon to match those like supply runs that happen every month. Social media is certainly one area, and if you do it well and you do it consistently and you do it with a level of intention, then you can certainly get to a place of self-sustainment. Like, there are sanctuaries who are so incredibly awesome and they are just pedal to the metal for fundraising through social media, and they have been able to build enough of a following, enough of a donor base through social media that their sanctuaries have gotten to full funding even before that 5 to 7 year horizon that we've talked about. So that is 100% an area to go. Another area to go as you think about maturing as a sanctuary is to move to more institutional asks. And when I think about institutions, I think about businesses, I think about grants, I think about other nonprofit foundations. And those are great ways for you to step into a space where you might already be established as a sanctuary, you are a known quantity within your local community. You may have developed specific partnerships with businesses and other nonprofits, or you are starting to develop specific work streams that open you up for grants from either granting organizations or other foundations. And so a couple of things as you think about that maturation process. First is it does require that you have been around as a sanctuary for some time and that you have things that are indicative of a mature sanctuary. So I've talked about it before, but please make sure that you have filed for your 501c3 nonprofit status through the IRS. It is something that is very straightforward and simple to do if you are a nonprofit within the US. It takes roughly 6 weeks to, from start to finish, to file and get approved. And it certainly shows people that you are legitimately a nonprofit organization. If you are not a 501c3 sanctuary, you are a for-profit business. And I know that's like, you may think, gosh, well, I do this for the welfare of animals. I appreciate that, but from a corporate structure, and how your corporate structure indicates what kind of business you are, if you're not a nonprofit, you are a for-profit. So, like, think about doing that. And if you have not gotten your nonprofit status yet, I would really encourage you to lean into taking care of that. You will also want to make sure that you are registered with your local authorities. So please make sure that, if your home state, like my home state of Washington, requires that you register as a nonprofit community benefit organization, like, take care of that. If you're in Oregon and you need to go through your Department of Agriculture inspections, like, take care of that. Like, please operate on the up and up, because not only are you an ambassador for yourself, but you are really an ambassador for how other sanctuaries run. And when we have bad actors in our community, it really taints the work that we all attempt to do. So really encourage you, if you are taking the next step to the next level, that you have the foundation of your business structure and your organization taken care of. The next area that you will want to think about for being a mature organization is to make sure that you have a functioning board. And when I say a functioning board, that doesn't mean that your spouse it's your other board member. Like, you have outside people, you have regular board meetings, you capture your board meeting minutes, and that sort of stuff is like part and parcel for any type of operating nonprofit. And your local governing entity will have guidelines about what the requirements for having a board, board meeting minutes, and that overall sort of fiduciary responsibility for the nonprofit looks like. You will also want to make sure that you have enough of a runway of third-party audited financials. And I recognize, like, if you are a nonprofit like us, our budget is less than $50,000 a year. We fundraise less than $50,000 a year. So the IRS submission that we make is very straightforward and simplified. But I do get our financials reviewed and audited by a CPA, just so as we think about stepping into receiving grants and applying for larger grants, like, we have already done that work and everything is already taken care of. So, like, CPAs are not crazy expensive. So like think about doing that work as well. And last but certainly not least is to think about, you know, where people can go to see the work that you do. And this is where sort of social media comes into play. This is where having an updated and current website comes into play. But you'll want to make sure that if someone is interested and researching more about your organization, that your presence online and that your presence on social media is really above reproach. And we see sanctuaries where how can I say this? For sanctuary founders, you have to be especially cognizant that who you are online, even in your personal accounts, like that is something that is open for review and discussion with granting organizations, just like if you worked for a for-profit business. And so like we see sanctuary founders and executive directors whose like Instagram profiles look like an OnlyFans site. I mean, and it's just like you think about the professionalism that you want to carry forward with your sanctuary. And you may say, look, like I have zero intention or interest, and it's not within our fundraising strategy to go to that next level. Like we don't intend to ask for institutional support. We don't intend to ask for or apply for grants, and that's fine. Like do whatever you want. My ask that you consider is if there is a point where you ever aspire to take that next level, you should be prepared for those organizations to research you, not just as an organization, but as a board, as an executive director, and they will be looking to see if you as an organization and as a person align with what they're about. So like just be conscientious about that, just as you would in a professional day job. That is the next area that you can focus on for overall fundraising. One last point on expanding your reach and potentially partnering with other organizations. And this is where like having your framework of what you will and won't do and who you will and won't engage with in fundraising is so important. Like I know, for example, that for us as a sanctuary, we have made the decision that even though we use primarily local feed and supply stores for the sanctuary so that we are supporting local businesses, we would be pretty hard pressed to accept any type of funding or money from a feed store because their orientation is not towards the compassionate care and philosophy towards animals. I mean, they are primarily existing to help supply and further animal agriculture. So that's just like not what we're about, and we would be loath to accept money from a feed store. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, but you should be clear within yourselves as an organization about like why you will or won't and why that's in line with your values or not. So the last consideration and place where you can certainly go for funding and fundraising is to think about how you open your doors for specific community events. And as a sanctuary, we have taken that step forward of opening our door for community events and engagement in a couple of different ways. First, our mission is to be a sanctuary for all animals, and that includes people. And for people specifically, we really want the sanctuary to be a place of respite, of recovery, and of reconnection. We want to evangelize, and I use that word very intentionally, this idea that farmed animals are not here for our consumption, that we want people to interact with our residents in a way that's respectful and considerate to the residents, but we really want people to be able to have time to connect with our residents and perhaps think about who they are as sentient beings. so that they start making more compassionate choices around their eating habits. And so to that end, we have opened our doors for community events like our spring egg hunt. We have opened our doors to partner with other nonprofits. So we have partnered in our egg hunts to bring in other nonprofits like Vine Maple Place, who focus on families who are struggling with homelessness. We have partnered with, because we are the Muddy Pug, we have partnered with the Church of Pug, which is the largest pug-related nonprofit and rescue in the Puget Sound. And we have a variety of events to raise funds for them. Our Pug Pride event coming up at the end of June notwithstanding. And then we are also really proud to begin opening our doors this summer to partner with a local domestic violence nonprofit to hold group therapy sessions as well as teen education sessions for domestic violence prevention. If you watched my last video around why I had wanted to quit the sanctuary at one point, you will understand why domestic violence recovery is such a important focus, a healing focus for me personally, as well for the community. But I would just encourage you to, as you think about opening your doors for community events, that you are very strategic about how those specific nonprofits, partnerships, or those specific events align with who you are as an organization. Not only in the who and the what of the events is important, but what you are doing in the events is also, I think, very important to ensure that those align with who you are as an organization. So to give you an example, I am religiously straight edge. So that means that I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do any drugs. I have never done that ever in my life. And it is one of my core values. I think that drugs and alcohol and tobacco have caused so much irreparable harm to people, to communities, to families, and Mama does not want that anywhere near this sanctuary. So when we have events, even when we have events like our summer supper, we do not allow alcohol on the sanctuary. For me personally, I think being a place of respite and recovery is completely incompatible with alcohol consumption. The other concern that we have as a sanctuary is, I know that there are organizations who have like large parties on their sanctuaries, or they have events where like you can pay to open a bottle of wine and hang out with baby goats. I live in a rural community, and usually the people that are coming in for those types of events are coming in from further afield. And the last thing that we want to do as a sanctuary is for people to be imbibing alcohol and get on our rural community roads with my other rural community members. I think it puts people at risk, both the people who are attending those functions as well as other people that are around. So that is another reason why, as a sanctuary, we do not do any events that serve alcohol or have anything in that capacity on the sanctuary. So again, like, that's who we are as a sanctuary. That might not be who you are as a sanctuary, but just be clear about what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, so that like you can be right within you about how you roll. There is one last big consideration when you think about fundraising and how you are receiving money into the sanctuary. So we do see a lot of sanctuaries, and we are also considering it as well, who are standing up things like Airbnbs, who are standing up, Airbnb tours or other types of events or stays on their sanctuary that allow the sanctuary to generate money. So if you are in the US, you will want to be hyper aware of the IRS rules around mixing business-oriented activities and nonprofit-oriented activities. This is an area where, holy smokes, like, you do not want to have the undivided attention of whatever regulatory body sits within your jurisdiction. And I would just really recommend that as you are thinking about all these different ways, if you are stepping into a space where your revenue generating activity could potentially be seen as income and it's taxable, to like slow your roll and make sure that you really understand how to do that properly to keep the finances of the sanctuary and sort of taxable activities separated. Holy cow, I'm glad I got through this video because I don't think I could take doing another take of this thing. Thank you so much for getting through this conversation with me. Just as I said in the beginning, this is something that you can learn how to do. So we're going to attach some links in the description of this video to help get you started. I would really recommend that you do some of your own research first. There are plenty of organizations who want to charge you an F ton of money to do this function for you, but like, see how you do first, and then decide if this is something that you want to engage with additional professional support in. Thank you so much to everyone who supports us on the sanctuary, who has donated to our work. Thank you so much to the people who work in the day-to-day of our sanctuary, our fabulous sanctuary coordinator, Amber, and our wonderful group of dedicated volunteers. We could not do this work in the day-to-day without the people that work and support the sanctuary. We will see you for the next segment with so much love from the Muddy Pug. Mahalo nui loa.